All right, here we are with Wet Your Palate. We got myself, Joe Wagner, Chris Fat Mario Rubio, and a special guest on this episode of Go With Your Palate. So if you want to stick around for it, we went through a number of different items. Of course, Robbie is a well-known winemaker here in Napa Valley. Great to have you.
Oh, man, it was a pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
What were some of the highlighted topics that you would say are on this podcast?
Well, cyborgs is where we finished, and that's a little bit out there. We talked hogs.
Yeah?
We talked 4-8.
Getting to hear about what you do, the wines that you make for yourself, the wines that you make for other people, and how you dissect that into kind of different compartments. I found that extremely fascinating.
The difference between what it is like to have a real human connection in what you do, as we were comparing somms and wine consulting and stuff
And
like that.
that would be somms, not solms.
Somms. Yes.
Yeah.
Somms. Somms?
So I've been telling people this, and you know, it's like, the joke is that it's the old like Robert Mondavi thing, because he used to always be like, "This is the best vintage ever."
Ever vintage.
And every vintage was the best vintage ever. And so after, because I was really worried, like we're going through veraison, and there was some really funky like dynamics as far as like development of fruit versus development of the vine itself.
Right.
And so I was like, I was thinking it's gonna be a low color year and a really light funky year. And we started getting fruit in. And
You were thinking that before this year?
yeah, no, I mean
before
like
harvest?
Yeah, like while we were going through veraison, I was like, nothing's adding up. Like this doesn't seem like it's going to be a quality year. And then we started getting stuff in, and it was just bleeding color, smelling great, like some of the best fermenters I've ever smelled. Everything's tasting good. You know, all of our Pinots are put to bed, or most of them. There's a couple that are still fermenting, and we're going through cab pretty heavy right now. And so I think it's not just the best vintage in my career. Mm-hmm. I think it's the best vintage in 100 years.
Okay. I
And
like
so,
that enthusiasm.
Yeah. And people,
like that enthusiasm.
people are like, really? You think that? I'm like, this isn't.
Are you on board with this?
Well, I'm certainly on board with many elements to it. I said, and if you listen to my podcast, I said this yesterday, that I tasted, in particular, one fermenter. Not that all of them aren't great, but one that is possibly the best fermenter I've ever tasted. Who knows where that wine goes? You know, there's a long way to go. But it's, I think, the best fermenter I've ever tasted. And whether it's mine or someone else's or anything, this happened to be Pritchard Hill Fruit. Not that that's one way or another.
You're already starting from a good spot.
It's starting from a good spot. But this was really like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. You know, and I'm pretty pessimistic and pretty an old man who's grumpy, and for me to be like, wow, that's a very, very good sign. So I'm on board.
That's good to hear. I'm glad it's not just like, you know, this is just a marketing pitch from me. This is
no, you got the Robbie blue check mark right there.
That's
dude.
right.
Like, like it's certified now,
It's
dude.
certified.
Yeah.
It's certified. It's certified.
Yeah,
We know.
Robbie's typical pessimistic blue check mark for the positive at 23. Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, should we do like an introduction as we're
Yeah.
Hello all.
Welcome to Go With Your Palate. We got another episode here. You got my counterpart, Chris Fat Mario Rubio, myself, Joe Wagner, but the man of the hour is our guest, Robbie Meyer, who makes Peirson Meyer, and he's been a fellow winemaker here in Napa Valley for many years. Our kids went to school and still go to school together.
Yep.
And so we got to know each other over the years, and I had the luxury of being on your podcast.
You were on mine.
Yeah.
We
that
are-
podcast Drop the Check.
That's right.
Yeah, drop the check.
Drop
and
the Check
it was fun. If you want to get into that one, go for it. And so happy to have you here. Thanks for coming.
Man, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm a little bit studio envy going on because
Giving him a little tour.
you've been to my studio, and mine's more of a man cave turned studio, but it works.
You know what? Yours is a guest house that is an awesomely outfitted guest house. Like you can't see it on the podcast. It's much tighter shots, so it's really just the Robbie and the guest. But then you stand up from the kitchen table where you're doing the podcast, and like it's a beautifully done little what would you call it?
An outbuilding. I don't know. I don't have a good name for it because there's not a bedroom in there, right?
Yeah.
It's a living room, a bathroom, and I hate the term man cave.
Yeah.
It's my podcast studio that's outfitted for whatever else, watching the football game.
So
Like
tell
a
me about.
luxury dungeon?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I like this. Although it's above ground. It's above ground.
Can we call it speakeasy? He loves speakeasy.
With it, it's a dungeon in like the not so kinky way.
Yeah. Speakeasy may be better.
Yeah.
Speakeasy, we'll go with speakeasy.
So you had a really cool flooring in there.
Yes.
So why don't you
Bowling alley.
Yeah, it was bowling alley. So
Yeah.
how did you do that?
Well, I mean, I just started doing this thing, and the story was we're in Napa, right? We're in downtown Napa, and every bit of square foot of real estate is valuable and important, so why not use it? And so I had this space that was. It was probably a garage in the 1930s, but someone lived there in like the 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, when I got it, the home was restored, but not this building. And I was like, this is too good of a space not to use. What am I going to do? I didn't need another bedroom. I didn't need another kitchen. I didn't need whatever. And so I just, gutted it and just kind of started planning it kind of ad hoc. And here's what I'm going to do. And I wanted like some cool wall features. So I have this cool mural, this silk thing on the wall. And then doing the floors, there was concrete. We re-poured concrete. And it was actually my contractor, Adam, was like, hey, you like weird shit, right? And I was like, yeah, I do, as a matter of fact. And he was like, my friend is demolishing an old bowling alley. I think it was American Canyon or something like that.
Oh.
And he was like, you want me to buy the floors? And I was like, of course I do. So he just bought the alleys, and we just put them down on the floor. And
wait, okay, so I didn't know that was reclaimed flooring. So I got to ask, and this is totally off, like our normal subjects, but like. How do they pull it up and then refinish it?
Yeah. We did not refinish it.
Okay.
We polished it, whatever, but it's oak or whatever it is, and they actually comes in panels. So that's the width. There's the width of a bowling alley, and maybe they're like 8 feet long, something like that, and that's how it is in the bowling lane. Like those panels. So all it was, they were not, the building wasn't like falling down. They weren't decayed and neglected. They had been bowled on somewhat recently. So they're all polished up and everything. So you just pick it up, that panel, and just reassemble it onto the ground. They have like little dowels where you just screw it into the foundation.
Wow.
And
this sounds like a really cost-effective way to get a really cool floor.
Oh, is that they pulling it up? See, there you go. See, that's exactly what it was. It's those panels just like that.
Like, I'm thinking like a 4x8 foot panel. Like, number one, instead of like doing tongue and groove with like a 4-inch wide panel. Yeah. That seems like very economical.
But look at this, $455 for that piece, because these people weren't looking to sell it. And the guys were friends. I think we paid like $10 a panel.
Jeez.
And there's like $500 a panel.
Wow. All right. Well, I know what I'm doing for a new house.
Exactly. Oh, and it's so durable, right? You could literally throw a bowling ball on it. It's like
throw a bowling ball. Kids run down them.
Wine spills.
Yeah.
Wine spills wipe right up.
I've seen a few drunk women throw themselves down those things.
Exactly.
We could do human bowling.
The human bowling.
Yeah, that would be actually really fun. I could see that happening.
Yeah.
At your house. So, actually, I think, could we get, just really quick for those that may not know, I just think if we could just get a little snapshot, Robbie, of what you're doing now and what you're all about before. And we might get into a little bit of your origin story of what led you into the wine community and everything. But you got this podcast and the winery, so.
Yeah, it's one of those things that now, people of a certain age like myself at 52 years old, it's kind of like, Joe, you've told your bio probably 10 million times, right? And then now at the point, it's like, well, is that really my bio, or is this who I am is my own bio? It's kind of like, I work with some of these vineyards that I've worked with the same vineyards for now 25 years. And when I started working with them, it was a 30-year-old vineyard. And my story would be like, I work with the Charles Heinz Vineyard in Sonoma. It's a 30-year-old property or 30-year-old vineyard. And then I go, no, that was 25 years ago. It's actually a 55-year-old, vineyard. So
time flies.
Time flies. So, it's kind of almost like the same with me and my background. Yeah, I'm a Southern guy. I grew up in Atlanta, was born and raised there, but I've been here longer than I was ever there. So no, I'm a California guy. how did you get into the wine industry? Of course, I can tell you all those stories, but really this is my life, right?
Yeah.
It's like, so, currently in the current state of affairs, I have my brand, Peirson Meyer, that I've been working with since 2001 was our first vintage. So we're 22 years in with that. And all along the way, I've usually worked with multiple wineries at the same time. So, and I don't like the term consulting winemaker because I like to think of myself as boots on the ground, boots in the vineyard, making the decisions, working with, the team in an appropriate way. So more than just giving someone some information out there, I've worked in the past with Peter Michael Winery, Lewis Cellars, Jericho Canyon. I'm currently with Del Dotto. Several small vineyard owners around the Napa Valley, Malk Family Vineyards and Gratis and Goubel and all these little small producers who are wonderful. And I really enjoy my time doing that. I kind of scratch all itches in my various winemaking endeavors. And that really leads into just the, quality of life or style of life. We've talked about this before. It's like, I don't really separate, and it's not to be hokey and corny, like if you find what you love to do in life, you never work a day in your life. No, I work my ass off. And it's like, we were just talking about like wanting a day off. Like, I would really like to not work tomorrow. I don't want to make wine tomorrow, but I have to. But that's okay. I really, though, don't separate it out as being, a winemaker versus, now I'm a father. Now I'm doing a podcast, or now I'm, riding my bike. It's just kind of one entity, one life, and I feel very fortunate to have that experience. It's cool.
It's so it's funny because I was just thinking about this today, and I've been thinking about it for the last couple of weeks, probably because I'm getting tired, and we're on the tail end of harvest.
We just talked about it.
And then on top of the wine stuff, which I really love, as you do, being in the vineyards, being in the winery, and so I had a meeting yesterday with the distributor, today with the distributor. I had a marketing meeting, and a number of other meetings that like we're changing over our ERP system or whatever. So like all these like little things that are adding up. And I'm at the winery and I'm doing phone calls and I'm trying to get it all done. I'm like, and I called up and I was like, hey, I'm going to be late to this podcast because I just got like tied up.
Yeah.
And so it was this morning driving into the winery, and I was like, man, because I keep telling myself this over the last couple of weeks, how do I change my schedule so I'm not so just everything is filled? And you just come to the realization, you're like, You maybe you're just born a hustler, like not a hustler in the sense of like you're out on the street hustling and
but
whatever.
You're engaged in life.
Yeah, and you're like, and it's like, are we all just built a certain way, and you want to keep going after it, and you don't ever want to say no. Like I'll say no to certain things, but like you're always like, that's a challenge. Yeah. Fuck yeah, I'm in. Yeah. Like, and I think that once you realize that, and you're like, this is just who you are.
Yes.
And you not only do you love the profession that you have and whatever surrounds that profession, but you also love the thrill of the chase, and that
completely.
Right. I think that's a huge part of it.
Well, there is that, and so I had this same conversation this morning with my buddy Mike Anderson, who you now know from our podcast, who's my executive producer, but also a dear friend, and we were talking about this morning, like, oh man, I woke up with a lot of anxiety this morning, and I don't want to be that. I want to be whatever. And it's like, well, I that's pretty much my go-to, and that's not a bad thing. It's because there are so many things to do. Is that a bad thing? Not at all. It's like what I said, was like, well, when I was 5, I had to wake up and brush my teeth, and maybe I had to empty the dishwasher as a chore and then go to kindergarten. And then when you're 12, you had to wake up, brush your teeth, do the dishwasher, go to school, and then you had soccer practice. And then when I was 18, I had and then homework, and then you have a job, and then you have a family, and then you have whatever. And then when you have your own business, it's the same thing. You can start your business on year 1, and you're going to secure some great contracts. And then year 2, you have to go back and recycle that, but then you have an advancement on that. So that just every day, if you're an engaged person in life, if you care about your profession or your family or whatever it is that you like to do, it's going to build and build and build and build. And like, I don't know if do you ever think about retirement? I don't know that I could retire.
I don't think I'll ever retire.
No.
I think the hardest thing for any of us as humans to learn is delegation.
Yeah.
As you grow, but delegation goes back to it's not just. I think everybody just assumes delegation is like, okay, I started a business, it was a one-man show, now I've got 3 employees, now whatever, and I got to delegate. It's delegation to your, like you're talking family, delegation to your kids, delegation to your spouse.
That's right.
Like all delegation is not. Like it's not telling somebody what to do that is below you.
Right.
It's having somebody assist you in achieving a common goal.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part that a lot of people don't think about.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting into the
entrepreneurship.
Yeah. but
you guys always talk about this? Yeah.
No, you know what? We talk about a lot of stuff. This is actually pretty good.
We don't talk about this like specifically, but we always try to have some sort of like, entrepreneurial element to the podcast. Yeah. But like this is stuff that, this probably wouldn't have come up if you weren't here. So, but it is a real thing that I think people, rather than taking this very micro sort of perspective of what the definition of an item like delegation is, think of it as more of like a holistic element of life that you need to learn how to do. And it's the hardest fucking thing to do.
Because if you can't do that, you can't do something else.
Exactly.
Meaning that if you can't learn how to delegate, that means that's one less thing. Let's see my obsession the same way. I want to do one more thing. If I couldn't delegate, this evening pump overs, I couldn't be here right now.
Yep.
If I couldn't, it doesn't mean I'm not involved. It's just, like you say, delegation. And if you can't learn to do that, then you're going to be so on this little island of life that you're not going to get to explore the rest of it.
That's it. If you want to progress, or if you want to progress, you have to be able to learn that stuff. So
I heard that was like one of like the best qualities of like high performing CEOs.
Delegation.
Was delegation.
I would have to.
And it's efficiency, right? Of not spending your time trying to do something when you can actually easily delegate to someone that's a professional in that.
You know what one of the coolest feelings is that when you find somebody who can do a job like 100 times better than you can do.
Sure. Surround yourself people like that. It's the best.
It is. You're just like, holy shit! You make me look like a fool.
Right.
And I take pride in that. Like it's
well, I take such satisfaction in it because it's like, great, they make me look so much better than I could make myself look.
There's that part of it. That's the other angle. That's great.
We were talking. You were talking about that earlier too on one of our earlier podcasts too with making wine. Like there's certain varietal or ways of winemaking that you love to do and that you like to do, but there's like people on your team that like could have a different angle or idea or outlook on making like Chardonnay.
Yeah,
for example.
Yeah,
how they want to craft it and
exactly.
and letting them do that.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
fulfill that dream. And then like I learned from it. In any case, like whether that's somebody coming in and saying like maybe you should try this in grape growing. You're like, not something I would have ever thought about, but let's give it a shot. And you're like,
interesting.
Shit, yeah, it's really.
But
really
see
good.
that's as we were talking about the delegation, that's what's interesting to me. As you say, is an attribute of highly successful CEOs or whatever the case may be. And we're laughing saying, oh, I found this person who can do my job better than I can do it. But that's an art form. And
exactly.
that is an element in and of itself to success. It's kind of like, can Bill Belichick get on the field and play in the NFL? No, he can't. But can he direct people to do it and get the most out of their talent? That's why he's highly paid. That's why he's successful.
And he's one of the best goddamn ones there is, right?
The best in the world because he understands how to do that. So, I mean, I think that, not to sell yourself short and finding, not you personally, and all of us going, hey, I found this person who does my job better than I can do it. You shouldn't be embarrassed of that, and you shouldn't feel in any particular way. You should feel like cool that I found that person, and gave them the opportunity to do whatever. There's a lot to that.
And then they get growth out of it as well.
Yes,
and I think
absolutely.
that's one thing that that humans thrive on being challenged and finding successes and learning from failures, right? So that's if you don't have that, you're just probably a couch potato. I don't know. It's
or you have a different management style or concept of how life should work. There's names not to be mentioned, but I know of a winemaker who was a manager of winery teams, cellar crews, whatever. And his philosophy was find them doing something wrong. Like, so that they know that they're on guard, like they don't, screw up. And it's like
negative
the complete
management.
opposite of me. It was like, find them doing something right and go, that's amazing. Do that again. You're really, and then they're not going to want to do something wrong or, the type of managers that are out there that like every time something goes wrong, they're there.
Yeah.
And when they're not there, everything goes smoothly.
Yep.
That says a lot.
Yeah.
That says a lot.
And that is a certain management style.
Yeah.
I think we've all seen that in one way, shape, or form. That goes to our horrible bosses stuff with like that. That's just not the right way to operate.
No.
We do this segment at the end when it's just him and I and like about horrible boss segment.
Yeah.
All these crazy stories.
But it's all confidential. Like we don't know who sent it in.
Yeah, it's anonymous.
And then we read the story and then criticize the boss. We do. Come on, really? I mean, we give it a fair shake.
I mean, they're really bad bosses. I mean, like
the
stories are crazy.
I went in on this. I went in on this.
But this is the thing, and I do worry about this. It'll come up someday that like I have it like
that was me.
That was like I'm gonna be like I'll get to the end and it's like the punchline. It's like, oh, that was me. Like fuck you.
You're always the way. I feel like
I'm always worried about that. Like somebody's gonna catch me and I'm like, but I haven't really been a bad boss. Like
Are you sure it hasn't happened yet already?
No, there have definitely been a few that were not unwarranted. I will say that. Okay. We do
that too. There are people that write.
If you're in a position of management, you do not touch other people inappropriately.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. For sure.
It's supposedly it happens more than you would think. I mean, like it's kind of crazy when you hear some of these stories. You're like, what?
Yeah.
People get away with.
Okay, so you mentioned one thing that I actually did not know. That you had your first vintage in 2001 with Peirson Meyer.
With Peirson Meyer, yes.
Yep. So, and that was the first vintage that I had as well.
Oh, really?
So
with Bell Gloss.
With Bell Gloss, yeah. So, now, so I want to ask you one thing about this. So so number one, 2001 to 2020 vintage would be your 20th vintage, right? And so, because if you actually count it out on your fingers,
it's not 21, it's 20. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, everybody thinks it'd be 21, but it's actually the 2020 vintage. Yeah. So, did you think about doing like a 20th anniversary for the 2020 vintage?
I did.
Yeah,
and we know about that vintage, and so it was X, Y, and Z. Then it gets also into the weird thing of, are you celebrating in 2020? Which would be the 2017 vintage, or however you do whatever your releases are, or then you make it the 2020 vintage, and then I'm releasing it now as my 20th anniversary. And at the end of the day, I was like, I don't even have wine to spare. I'm like, I need one less SKU. I need one less thing. So I've done different things actually in 21 as a replacement for 20, just because one, I didn't have a lot of my wines in 20 or whatever, but in 21 I did special 3-liter magnums, and they're really just for internal reasons, and for like Shauna, my assistant winemaker, her son was born in 21, so we did like stuff like that. But I didn't really go big on an anniversary thing. Did you?
No, but I had the same thought as you. We actually were like putting all like our marketing ideas together.
Yeah.
I thought like 2020, that's a cool vintage to celebrate, not just because it's our 20th vintage in 2020.
Yes.
But like everything made sense. And then we had COVID, which was that like everything in 2020 was sour just because of that. Yeah. Like it was so limiting. And then we had the fires.
Yep.
And then you're just kind of like, okay, scrap the whole thing. And then my next thought, almost immediately, let's like, when you turn 21, you have the right to consume alcohol. So I was like, let's do the 2021. Oh. It'll be like, Bell Gloss is of age.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
And but then it was like, that's
a good idea. Not going to do that.
Like, we're not going to do that. Like, so so I felt like it was just a little. It was cute, but it was also not on brand for us. So we scrapped that. But I was like, man, that was just a missed opportunity with the 2020, and it'll come around 2025. Or 20, I guess it'd be 2025.
There we
will
go.
Be around. There
25th anniversary. Anniversary.
So I know you don't call yourself a consulting winemaker,
right?
And you got your own brands, the stuff you do for yourself, and then you actually some of the best wines I've had are made by you here in the Valley. I mean, I got to say, like even like Del Dotto is one very unknown if you haven't visited the region, because I think everything they do is DTC or direct to consumer.
There's very little in distribution. It's almost 99% DTC.
And it's a great wine. So if you're a let's call it a multi-brand winemaker.
Yeah. Yes, there you go. Yeah.
So,
and that's I find great, satisfaction in that. It's I think everything is kind of symbiotic. If I'm making the wine for Del Dotto, I'm using all my best skill set and everything else. But I'm looking at whether it's Dave Del Dotto or Yolanda or Des or Gio, the whole family, trying to make it through their lens, through their palate, and trying to use my skills and using my palate, because like if they say something that I think is a bad idea, I'll express that to them. Which that never really, it doesn't happen that way, but it might be they're trying to describe something to me, and I really have to be like an investigator and get into, what do you mean by that? Tell me your words more specifically. Don't say tannin. Tell me the experience you're having, and trying to produce a wine for someone through their lens and through their palate is a great challenge, and I love it very much. But maybe you can, as we have the term, right, a house palate, you can maybe distort your skills by going down a road that's not really your own. So then I have the outlet of Peirson Meyer, where I can just do precisely what is in my head, my own experience, without anyone being a positive critic or a negative critic. It's me out on an island. This is what happens when you follow your own thing.
Yeah.
And so that's very rewarding. And then there's other like little projects that allow me to work with either a different varietal that I'm not usually used to working with, or just a slightly different sub-region. And one of the things, and you have this in your professional experience, I feel so fortunate because I feel like I get 15 vintages in any one vintage.
Yeah,
right.
Wow.
Because I'm throughout Napa Valley, I'm throughout Sonoma County, I'm over in Livermore Valley, and when working at Peter Michael Winery was wonderful. Worked with some of the best fruit in the world, and wonderful winery and winemaking. But you were literally on this island. I would spend 2 months working every day, but not leaving that property, and it's like I would literally, from sunrise to sunset, and drive down the valley and go, oh, this is what it looks like down here, 10 miles away, like the change in canopy and everything else. Whereas these days, driving around all the time and going from vineyard to vineyard, I feel like I learn that much more each vintage because I get, my hands
so
on
many
experiences.
Yeah. What I was really curious about, and you really touched on it, you really hit it right on the head, was as a traditional consulting winemaker would be, one of the bigger names that's been out here is Michel Rolland.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was always the criticism of him kind of, coming in and just flying through the valley to everybody that he works for,
Right.
and all of those wines are going to be homogenous because he's saying it's time to pick. Everybody that he's consulting for picks. This is how you do it, and he's giving the call it the recipe or just the guidelines on how to make these wines.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have this very kind of a monotonous world of these luxury cabs in Napa.
Right.
And I'll give him credit. The wines are good.
Sure, but I get that's a valid point about this blanket, style of doing something. Yeah.
And so I like how you don't refer to yourself as a consulting winemaker, because that's exactly what I wanted to hear was like, is there a way to disassociate your personal preferences and honestly your ego? Because I mean, that's what it comes down to. Nothing against Michel Rolland, but his ego is driving the style, and that style is driving the points, and those points are driving his dollars into his pocket, right?
Right.
And so you're able to sit there with a group of people, whether it's ownership or the winemaking
fellow
team,
winemakers, yeah.
and kind of, and then become the interviewer and be like pulling out of them what they're getting, what they want to achieve. And to your point, having 15, 16 different vintages because there's so much diversity with everybody that you're making wine for.
Yeah.
That's a really cool thing.
Yeah, it is. And it's a very satisfying thing, and I wouldn't have it any other way, and I wouldn't do it in any other way. It's the same thing. People always ask me, like, you love Pinot, and I produce a Peirson Meyer Pinot, and I produce a Del Dotto Pinot, and I may make several different Pinots. Even within my own brand, I have 3 different Pinots. They're different because they're from different locations, and that's an element of terroir. Even within the same location, I might make a different Pinot for myself and for another person, because they might feel like, hey, I like something a little less ripe. You like something a little more intense. I might like this, and so it is trying to get to the personality and the root of it, and I really, really love that. I like that interaction. I tell people this little story all the time. I had an interview once with some well-known people, from vineyard management to the producer, the estate, and the owner was talking to me about potentially working together, and he kind of immediately jumps into pay structure, which that should come afterwards, and then within his pay structure, he was like, so I'm thinking, if you get a 98 to 100 points, you get this. And if you get 95 to 98, you get this.
Oh, no
and
way.
He had never mentioned, this is the style of wine I like. This is why I'm doing it. This is, here's some other brands that I buy and collect. It was right into that. His objective was to get a 100-point wine. And it's like, no one's going to not want a 100-point wine. But it was like, and I mean, that was the end of the conversation. I sat there, I talked to him, but I was checked out immediately after that. I was like, I never want to work with someone like that.
I would imagine, so I've never been a consulting winemaker, and I've never worked with a consulting winemaker.
Mm-hmm.
But I would imagine that is a personality that if you're consulting in any capacity, I imagine that's a personality you come across a lot, especially in this neck of the woods, because you are dealing with people who've been successful elsewhere and just dropped millions, tens of millions at least on a winery. And you know that what they want is that 100-point wine.
Yeah.
And I would imagine if I was in that position that you were in, I would say, well, the majority of wine critics are guys, right?
All right.
So I'd probably ask this owner, how good do you suck?
And we are here with Go With Your Palate. If you thought you were on
get
some
away.
nice winery podcast, we got you. We got you.
Oh, man.
Well, I mean,
But
there's truth to it. Because it is. That's exactly what he was doing. He was willing to. He had no interest in wine. He had interest in fame and fortune and whatever else. And he would be, willing. He probably would be willing to suck. It's like, it's truth.
I think it's a good time to bring up somms, because for some reason
Solms?
Yeah.
No, somms, not solms. Right?
Oh,
Well, somms.
I literally heard psalms.
Songs?
We're-
Psalms?
We're about to
Am I
get
saying
religious
songs?
on everybody's ass here. Let's go.
It's like, that's a part of your podcast is psalms?
I forgot to tell you.
This is when we meditate, Robbie.
We
Yes.
ask for forgiveness.
Lights down.
Just so we can fuck up again.
Insane.
Psalms.
Psalms.
Because he talks, I don't know, if you listen to the podcast, Joe this comes up a lot. But I'm going to bring up the point that I'm trying to make. And when you were talking about the wine consulting, it really felt like what I loved about what you were talking about is actually really getting to know who you're talking to and build that relationship and try to get what they want from it and make that come alive.
Yeah.
Not letting your ego get into it. And that's when it comes up with the conversation of somms, I feel like what we talk about a lot is that you would like to see them really trying to build a relationship with the person, what they're really wanting and what's going to go with the food that they're eating.
Exactly.
And have that relationship with the food and have a great experience rather than pushing their own initiative and their own ego.
Which
what
generally
needs to be
happens
sold
most
or
of
about
the
the
time.
money. Yeah.
Yeah, you put a percentage on it. What do you think?
Of the psalms who put their stamp
Yeah.
on everything, 99.
No,
A solid
we got
80.
some light.
Kindred spirit is what I'm hearing.
Hey, I saw my opening. I was like, let's go for it.
It's whatever the number is, it's very high, and it's also funny. Again, I've always and still to this day feel like the young generation, and now I'm realize I'm not the young generation any longer. And I look at the 25-year-old somm who is very passionate about wine, has learned a lot, and has et cetera, but they can't see the forest for the trees. It's like they don't have enough experience.
Yeah, I love that. I love that phrase.
Yeah,
can't see the forest through the trees.
Yeah, and so I don't have an axe to grind. I just wish. I think that's what you said. That I just wish they were more open-minded and trying to serve. They're in service, right? Serve the customer rather than I'm the show, I'm the boss, I'm the whatever else. And it's okay. It's like I like all of the esoteric wines are out there, but I hate when I go into like a great restaurant with great food, and there's just a bunch of orange wines, and there's a bunch of this, and you can,
the orange wines we did.
And then you just know, like I could just draw you a picture of what the somm's going to look like before they come out. It's like that's the 25-year-old, hipster guy, and it's like okay.
So another funny thing that comes out with age is that you become less reserved about what you say.
Yes.
And so I have found this more recently where I've always had a love-hate, and now it's more of, now I've tried to dissect it. Instead of being like a love-hate or a hate-hate with somms, it's like you can be a somm certified, but are you a good wine buyer?
Yeah.
And wine seller? If you're a somm who is simply just about your own personal ideologies, you're not going to be good at wine buying or wine selling. So I pulled it apart like that, and so there are some really great, and I'll just call them wine buyers that are certified sommeliers, right? So then you find the few that are kind of garbage, right? So I was in a restaurant. I won't mention any names either. Local.
That's surprising.
Great restaurant.
You probably will.
Well, because I know the owner of it.
Well, somebody get a doctor.
I know the owner. I know the chef, and I love what they do. Oh. I love their bar program, everything. I actually like a lot of their wine list.
Yeah.
But their Pinot Noir portion of the wine list is like a just a stamp of the same goddamn style of Pinot that's super light, super just earthy, funky, and
they have to have a multitude.
Yeah, they only had like 20 selections. I mean, that's not just only, like that's a good amount of selections, but it was 20 Pinots that you could taste them all side by side and be like, these are pretty much just slight variations of each other. And so the somm came over, and I ended up ordering a bottle of like Grenache or something. And because I do like to play around with the more obscure stuff, you know, just maybe not the super popular stuff. And I have a bit of a problem personally with paying like $800 for a bottle of Cabernet.
Sure, of course, of course.
So I'm human at the same time. But so the somm comes over. He's got like, hey, have you picked a wine out that you like? And I said, actually, I have, but I first wanted to just ask you, who wrote the Pinot Noir portion of this list? Because this restaurant has multiple sommeliers.
Okay.
And I know, now are you narrowing it down?
Yeah.
Oh, you know where he's talking about?
No, not yet.
Oh, but, so he goes, oh, it was so-and-so. And I said, you could take a picture of this and put it in a class for sommeliers as the perfect idiotic sommelier Pinot Noir list out there. Yeah. And he just kind of looks at me like, I was like, I'll do the Grenache.
I wanted Pinot.
That's really what I did want Pinot that day.
Yeah, that's the perfect example of that the somm who is serving themselves rather than the interest at large, and not even respecting the entire menu, because while some of those Pinots would go well with some of their food, there's probably other options, and also appeals to different people's palate and how they perceive that food pairing. That's it's not thinking about the restaurant environment or the somm, but the wine shop owner. And what I tell my customers, if people aren't just asking about my wine, but hey, I'm just getting into wine. What wine should I get? Or whatever. And I was like, here's what you need to do. How you get into wine. Find your local neighborhood wine shop that is good, that has a diversity of wines to it. Because wine shops are the same way as like that bad wine list. You can go into some wine shop and it's like, sure, you have good wines, but it's all basically the same thing.
Yeah.
And you go in, you meet that person, engage that store owner, and say, here's a wine that I like. I'm going to buy a bottle of this. Give me something else you think I might like. And let them guide you down a path. And you come back to that person and go, I didn't like that. It was too light. It was too earthy. Okay, I got you. Yeah. Here, try this one then. And that type of experience, to me, those are the heroes of the wine world. Are not the winemakers or the somm in the restaurant. It's that wine shop owner who they might have their section because they like, or just talk to some friends. They love Portuguese wines, and they have a wine shop, and they have a big Portuguese section, a lot. But they also have everything else.
Yeah.
And they don't try to get their people to like it. They make friends and have customers, and their customers go, well, what do you like? And they go, well, I love Portuguese ones. Try it. But not like you have to. This is the only thing you can have. It's like
how would you relate those? Because I agree, those people are the saints of the retail world in wine, and I love those kinds of shops. And it almost reminds me. I don't know if you're ever into hobbies growing up. Like, I love building models. I loved RC cars, all that stuff. You go into a hobby shop, and it's always some dude who just, he never fully grew up, but he could be still, 80 years old, right?
Yes.
And he knows everything about any hobby that he is carrying, right?
Yes.
And so you can just go down the list of, I like cars. I'm going to try, slot car racing.
Right.
I'll buy a little kit or something, stuff like that. He knows every goddamn thing about it.
Right. Oh, it's slot cars. We got slot cars for you.
I was going to say, I miss more of those. I feel like there's, less around there. Because, when you and I were growing up here, there was probably, 4, comic book shop, baseball card shops with some arcades in it, at least 4 or 5
in St. Helena or the Valley.
In St. Helena, there was bullpen, there was beautiful noise in St. Helena alone. So there was, and I think there was a third. That came up. I forget what the name of it was. In St. Helena, which is
I got an idea, guys. We can go in on this together.
Can we do it?
It's a record store with some pinball machines, and then you got your hobby art, you got your model plane building, and you got your Dungeons and Dragons section.
Yeah.
Okay, but
dude, I think this is very nostalgic for people, and people would love it.
We need a Street Fighter 2 though, so I could just I just want to beat Joe's ass every week. That's right. In front of people,
You're such a little bitch, dude. You used to spend the entire weekend.
We could do Mortal Kombat, bro, because I like this.
But just as a side note, when you say that about the guy who runs that shop, that's the although an annoying version of it, that character on The Simpsons, right? The big fat guy who runs the comic book shop.
Oh yeah.
This worst day ever, whatever he says. Look, here we go. There it is. That's we got to open right there.
That stuff is going great. Actually, so we're in. We went to Colorado for this this sales incentive, this trip we did, and I can't remember the name of the place. Anyways, it was this kind of speakeasy-ish place. You walk in this back door, and they got a bar, and it was a restaurant, but really swanky as hell.
Yeah.
And then when you're done eating, you would walk through this really fancy looking library area, and then you go into this arcade that had all of the old school stuff, everything from you all of your classic arcade games down to Pong, but then they also had skee ball and all that, and they were having a lawyers convention. And so it was me and I don't know 15 people that are in the wine business. We walk into this place and it's nothing but young 25, 30-year-old attorneys.
Right.
They're all coked out of their minds.
Of course.
And so everybody in our company is pretty damn competitive.
Yeah.
And so we're let's take these fucking cokeheads off.
Of course.
And so we're all right, skee ball, let's go. Ah!
But what's the finality? Were they better or worse?
It was a mixed bag.
Okay.
I don't think it enhanced their performance at all.
It reminded me of the Eddie Murphy, Charlie Murphy story of them playing basketball against Prince. Oh, you heard this before?
Go ahead.
So they meet out in the club, and it's Prince is hey Charlie Murphy, hey Eddie Murphy, whatever. It's you want to come over to the house, and they go over to Prince's house. and it's like the Murphy crew and all their dudes, and Prince and all the guys in their, whatever outfits, and they challenge, the Murphys to a basketball game.
Dude, that
and
was
Prince
so
and his dudes win. So I was wondering if like the coked out lawyers came out and then they beat your
just
ass
crushed
and
our
everything.
ass.
That was Dave Chappelle.
It was
Yes,
yes.
yes.
I didn't count tickets, but because they did have the old school tickets like when you're winning those games. But it was the whole experience of like walking into this place and having all these games. It was absolutely awesome. So before we could talk more about this, but I am opening. I've been sitting here with the corkscrew in this bottle of wine for like 5 minutes. So I'm going to pop this open.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about it while I pour some glasses?
Well, it's the 2021, so I mean, I honestly haven't had a lot of this because this is just kind of our current release. I think James, our wonderful sales leader for Peirson Meyer, he is just going to be releasing this like right now. And so, the 2021 Peirson Meyer Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon. And, I've been producing this particular wine since 2005. And I've never vineyard designated it, even though, so it started out from Pritchard Hill at the old, I used to produce wine for Dick Martin, who had this brand called Versant up on Pritchard Hill, that he then sold that property to Tim Mondavi for Continuum.
Yep.
And so Continuum was built up of the Versant property and Cloudview property. Anyway, that's where the grapes originally came from there. When he sold the property, Tim was very kind and like gave me like a year or two where I continued to buy the fruit. And this was even back in the day, and rightfully so for what he paid for the property. It was like, yeah, that's going to be, $20,000 a ton or whatever. And that was back then. And so I was like, I appreciate the effort, but I've got to get out. So I had also been making wine for Kennefic Ranch.
Oh, yeah.
And so I love that property. I made the wines from there. I know the property very well and got some choice selections of this is 100% Cab, but I also have a red blend called the Maquette, which is Cab Merlot and Cab Franc, and I have wonderful selections from the property at Kennefic Ranch. So this could be vineyard designated, but just because of the tradition, I've just never vineyard designated it. Maybe I'll change, but...
Well, here, let's raise a glass real quick. Thanks for being on.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
The nose is beautiful. I was just drinking this Topo Chico, the hard seltzer, which I know you're a lover of Topo Chico sparkling water, as I am. But I think it may be you may have a way higher level of love for it. But this clears your palate of what this. Really quickly. There's so much going on in this wine.
Yeah.
But I do want to jump into Kennefic Ranch because number one, I didn't know you were making the wines there. I've always loved the.
I did. Kent Jarman is making them now.
Okay.
And I started making the wines there maybe around like 2005 to 2009.
Okay.
I'm probably off on my years. But at that time, Kent and I were working together on all of my various winemaking endeavors. He worked on Peirson Meyer and all that stuff. But Kennefic wanted to like grow and develop, and also, they have their 125-acre vineyard, and they really wanted more help on vineyard, not vineyard management as much as logistics and who's selling to who and et cetera, et cetera. And so I was like, hey, look, Kent really needs to have his own gig. He's a very talented winemaker. And this is more than I can do and we need to do at a time. There's no sense for me to be even involved. It's like if you guys want my opinion on anything, feel free to ask. I'd like to buy fruit from you guys. But, Kent and Tom Kennefic and now Chris Kennefic, you guys work together. I don't need to be involved in this. So, yeah.
That location, because it doesn't have its own appellation in that area, Calistoga is kind of all lumped in together. So as everybody listening, if you're not familiar with the area, it's kind of as far north in Napa Valley as you can go. and really not really proper, so to speak.
And
but,
it's really probably like a mile from the Lake County. I don't know where the border is.
Yeah, it's right there.
But yeah.
And but it is what I call East Side Calistoga.
Yeah.
And it's right under the Palisades, and it is like I would say that is my second favorite place, sometimes contending for first for Cabernet in the entire valley. And then
it's up on that little bench.
Yeah, as it just goes. Goes up slightly. So there's that like other valley that kind of goes up. If you go north, like the northern portion, it's the southern portion that kind of curves up into that deeper valley.
Yep.
And God, the wines that we've made out of that area have been just always stellar.
Yep.
And they, I mean, obviously it shows through in this wine too. What do you charge for this wine?
That's 120.
Okay. That's a steal of a price for that.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting thing, and that's my like poor business management. I feel like I run a nonprofit, and that like I said, like James, who does all of our sales, which I don't personally want to do. It's like I'm always like, James, you realize you make more money than I do. It's like, or whatever, or else, or Shauna who helps on the production side, but again, like I do this as this kind of like personal endeavor. I have other jobs that I do. This is something that's kind of like, socialistic isn't the right word because that gets tagged with all sorts of political things, but I take great pride that you make that comment that this delivers for value.
Yeah.
Like I would be so embarrassed if someone, which you still have people like my dad's generation, who he's 93, go, how much for that bottle of wine?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
But the 99% of the comments are, wow, that's a value. And I take great pride in that.